It wasn't a proposal, it was a sentence. Chief Bolanli Adeoye placed his gold-rimmed eyeglasses on the polished mahogany. The click of the arms folding was the only sound in the cavernous study. He picked up a silk handkerchief and began to polish the lenses with slow, methodical circles. Amara stood before him, her hands clasped behind her, her frame perfectly still. "The board is in agreement," the patriarch finally said, his voice as smooth and hard as the desk. "It is time for you to be settled." The young woman's gaze remained fixed on a point just over his shoulder. She didn't speak. This was not a conversation, she knew. It was a declaration. Her adoptive mother, Yewande, sat in a brocade armchair to the side, twisting the diamond on her wedding ring. The facets caught the light, sending tiny, frantic flashes across the room. Her eyes were locked on the expensive Persian rug, studying its intricate patterns as if they held an answer. "We have found a suitable match," Chief Adeoye continued, slipping his spectacles back on. "A man of simple means, an artisan. His name is Kalo." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken contempt. Simple means, artisan, a nobody. This was the entire point. From the doorway, a sharp two-syllable laugh cut through the tension. "Ha ha!" Zola leaned against the frame, a glittering phone in her hand. She wore a vibrant red dress that seemed to suck all the color from the space. Her eyes, narrowed with amusement, flicked from her father to the silent figure of her adopted sister, an artisan. "Father, you are too generous," the heiress purred, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her screen. "It's about time Amara found her level." The chief did not acknowledge his daughter. His focus was solely on the still woman before him. He was a man closing a ledger, finalizing an entry that had been open for far too long. He had taken her in as a favor to a dead friend, a strategic alliance from another era. Now, with Adeoye Global Conglomerate teetering on a knife's edge, that connection was a liability. The company needed a lifeline, a massive injection of capital from a ghost investor known only as KO. Every asset had to be secured for the bloodline. This marriage would neutralize the loose thread. "He is a respectable man," the tycoon said, the lie tasting like nothing in his mouth. "He will provide for you." Yewande's frantic ring-twisting grew faster. She risked a glance at her adopted daughter, her expression a mess of pity and helplessness, before looking away again. Amara felt the weight of their combined stares. Zola's smug triumph, her mother's weak guilt, her father's cold finality. They were all waiting for the breakdown, for the tears, for the begging. She took a slow breath. Her gaze moved from the wall and met the chief's. Her expression was placid, her voice even. "When is the wedding?" The question dropped into the silence like a stone in a well. Zola's smirk faltered for a second. Chief Adeoye's eyebrow twitched, a flicker of surprise he quickly suppressed. He had prepared for hysterics, not logistics. "The arrangements will be made swiftly," he replied, recovering his composure. "It is best not to delay." "I understand," she said. Amara gave a small, respectful nod, turned, and walked out of the study. Her back was ramrod straight. Her footsteps were silent on the marble floor. The moment she was gone, Zola pushed off the doorframe and sauntered into the room. "Well, that was boring. I thought she'd at least cry a little." The girl flopped onto a leather sofa. "Now about the gala. Did you see the caterer's quote?" "Absolutely not. We need something that screams success, especially if this mysterious KO character is actually going to show his face." Chief Adeoye stared at the empty doorway. The chilling composure had unnerved him far more than any outburst would have. It felt like a miscalculation. He pushed the feeling aside. It was done. A problem solved. His phone buzzed on the desk, an email from his assistant. The subject line was stark, urgent, follow up with Onyeka Capital. He opened it. The message was brief. "We write to inform you that Mr. K.O. has once again declined a meeting. He stated his schedule is full." A vein pulsed in the man's temple. This was the fifth rejection. Days later, Amara met Kalo. The introduction was a sterile affair in a small, impersonal office downtown. He was not what she expected. He was lean, dressed in a simple, unbranded black sweater and dark jeans. He didn't carry himself like a man defeated by life, but with a strange humming energy, his eyes constantly scanning the room. "A pleasure," he said, his voice a low baritone. The lawyer droned on about legalities and the dowry, a pittance, an insult wrapped in legal jargon. Kalo just nodded, his focus on the cheap plastic pen the solicitor was using. The ink distribution in that model is notoriously uneven, he commented suddenly. The lawyer blinked, flustered. The ballpoint mechanism. It creates pressure spots leading to inconsistent flow, Kalo explained. A fountain pen is more efficient. The wedding was a week later, a public humiliation orchestrated by Zola. A stuffy hall in a forgotten part of the city. A handful of distant relatives paid to attend. The pity wedding, she captioned a photo of Amara in her ill-fitting dress. Through it all, her new husband was a calm island. When a cheap decorative banner started to peel from the wall, he stepped over and secured it with a deft, precise movement. After the ceremony, a driver from the Adeoye house, a man who used to greet Amara with a smile, now refused to meet her eyes. He drove them to a small, unremarkable apartment building and left their single suitcase on the curb. The exile was complete. They walked up 3 flights of stairs. Kalo unlocked the door to a sparsely furnished apartment. Amara walked to the single window and looked out. This was her new life. A cage, but a different cage. Her husband came to stand beside her, not too close. The structural integrity of this building is questionable, he said, his voice neutral. The load-bearing walls show signs of water damage. He pulled a vibrating phone from his pocket. The screen lit up his face in the dimming light. She caught a glimpse of the notification on the lock screen before he swiped it away. It wasn't a text message. It was a stock market alert, a complex graph showing a steep downward trend line. Below it, the name of the stock was displayed in stark white letters, AGC, Adeoye Global Conglomerate. He swiped the alert away before she could be sure of what she saw. The screen went dark and Kalo slid the device back into his pocket as if it were nothing. The air in the small apartment was thick with unspoken questions. "It is late," her husband said, his voice breaking the silence. "You should rest." Amara simply nodded. She picked up the lone suitcase and carried it into the bedroom. The space was even more Spartan than the living area, just a bed with a plain gray duvet and a small wooden wardrobe. It was a blank slate. She closed the door behind her. For a moment, she just stood there, listening to the faint sounds of him moving in the other room. She walked to the bathroom, a tiny room with a cracked mirror above the sink. The woman staring back wore a cheap dress and a placid expression, but her eyes were ablaze with calculation. An artisan who analyzes structural integrity. A poor man with a sophisticated stock tracking app. These were data points that did not align. In her old life, contradictions were always a sign of danger. She leaned against the door, and the mask she had worn for years finally began to crack. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth to stifle the sound, her body trembling with silent sobs. 1 minute. Then it was over. She pushed herself upright, splashed cold water on her face, and when she looked in the mirror again, the composure was back. The first week was a study in quiet observation. He would leave early and return late, never saying where he was going. She spent her days organizing their small space, finding comfort in repetitive tasks. She cleaned the windows until they sparkled and arranged the few plates and cups in neat, precise stacks. She learned his routines. He drank his tea black. He read not from books, but from a sleek, unmarked black tablet that never seemed to need charging. The silence between them was vast, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was analytical. She was studying him, and she had the distinct feeling he was doing the same. One afternoon, a delivery courier buzzed their apartment. A young man stood there with a large, flat cardboard box. "Delivery for Kalo," he said. She hesitantly signed the electronic pad. Inside, nestled in custom-fit foam, was a state-of-the-art server blade. It was a piece of high-grade enterprise technology, the kind that ran data centers. And it was not the kind of thing an artisan would have delivered to his tiny apartment. She quickly taped the box shut. That evening, her husband came home and saw the package. "A delivery arrived," Amara said, her voice carefully neutral. "I see that," he replied. He simply knelt, opened the container, and lifted the server out as if it were a common household appliance. He disappeared into the bedroom with it. A few minutes later, she heard the faint, rhythmic sound of a screwdriver. Meanwhile, back in the Adeoye mansion, life had become a pressure cooker. Chief Adeoye paced his study like a caged lion. The Gala was less than 2 weeks away, and there was still no word from Onyeka Capital. "They are calling in the short-term loans, Bolanle," Yawanda cried, her voice strained. "We will host the most spectacular gala this city has ever seen," he snarled, slamming his palm on the desk. We will project strength. We will flush this KO. Out of hiding. Zola breezed in, scrolling through her phone. The invites went out. Digital, of course. She looked up, a malicious glint in her eye. I sent one to Amara, too. Yewande gasped. Zola, why would you do that? For fun, the girl said with a shrug. Let the whole city see what happens when you're not one of us. The discarded daughter and her little artisan husband. It'll be the highlight of the party. Back in the apartment, Kalo was working at the small kitchen table, methodically reassembling the server blade with a set of precision tools. A soft chime from the black tablet broke the silence. He paused his work and tapped the screen. An email was open. Amara caught a glimpse of the AGC logo at the top before he angled it away. He was silent for a long moment. Then, without looking up, he spoke. We have been invited to a party. Her blood ran cold. What party? A gala. For the 50th anniversary of Adeoye Global Conglomerate. He finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. It appears your sister sent the invitation to an old email account, an account I have been monitoring. The statement was dropped so casually, yet it landed with the force of a physical blow. He had been watching her. For how long? Why? We will not go, Amara said, her voice barely a whisper. Kalo finished tightening a screw on the server board. He set his tool down with a quiet click. He looked directly at her, and for the first time his gaze was not analytical or distant. It held a glint of something she couldn't name. It looked like a challenge. Oh, I think we will, he said, his voice low and steady. I think it's time we met your family properly. The decision was made. They were going to the gala. A new tension, sharp and electric, filled the small apartment. Kylo said nothing more about it, returning to his strange work as if the matter was settled. Amara watched him, a knot tightening in her stomach. He was no longer just a mystery, he was an enigma with a plan. The next few days passed in a blur of silent preparation. His life didn't seem to change. He still left early and came back late. But now, small, significant things began to appear. One afternoon, a plain shopping bag was on the kitchen table. Inside was a simple, elegant dark blue dress. It was unadorned, made of a heavy silk that felt luxurious. There were no labels, but the cut was exquisite. It whispered wealth, it didn't scream it. It was exactly her size. Try it on, her husband said when he got home, barely glancing up from his tablet. She took the garment into the bedroom. It slid on perfectly, fitting her as if it were custom-made. It was a suit of armor. She came out of the bedroom, and for the first time, Kalo stopped what he was doing and looked at her. His analytical gaze swept over her from head to toe. He gave a single curt nod. Approval. The following day, she found a small velvet box on her pillow. Inside was a pair of beautiful pearl earrings. They were not large, but their luster was deep and iridescent. They were real. She was standing there holding the box when Kalo came home. They will suffice, he said, walking past her into the kitchen. Who are you? The question she had been holding in for weeks finally broke free. He stopped, his hand on the refrigerator door, and turned to face her. I am your husband, he stated simply. The dress, the earrings, the server, the stock alerts, she countered, her voice low but firm. This is not the life of a simple artisan. No. It is not. He gestured for her to sit at the kitchen table. My father was a man who loved things. Kalo began, his voice quiet. He loved big cars, loud parties, expensive watches. He built an empire on looking successful. But it was hollow. He paused, his gaze distant. When it all came crashing down, he lost everything. I watched it happen. I decided to live differently. I value knowledge, efficiency, privacy. This, he gestured around the Spartan room, is a choice. It is a filter. Amara stared at him. A billionaire in self-imposed exile. It was a story so outlandish it had to be true. He hadn't lied to her family. He had simply allowed them to see what they wanted to see. And me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Am I part of the filter? His expression softened almost imperceptibly. I read the file on your family's business. On you. They described you as a liability to be offloaded. I was curious. In all their documents, you were the only variable they couldn't quantify. I find that interesting. The front door buzzed, a harsh sound that shattered the moment. Kalo's body went rigid. A tinny voice crackled through the intercom. Message from Chief Adeoye. He requests your presence. Immediately. Kalo pressed the talk button, his thumb white against the plastic. We are not available. A loud, insistent banging started on their front door. Bang, bang, bang. Open this door! On the chief's authority. He looked through the peephole. It is his driver, Kalo said, his back to her. He is not alone. The banging grew louder, a physical assault. He walked into the bedroom and returned a moment later, holding his sleek black tablet. He tapped the screen a few times. "One moment," he said. He held the tablet out so she could see the screen. It was displaying a live satellite map of their street. A red dot marked their building. Two other dots, one blue and one green, were moving rapidly toward their location. "What is that?" she breathed. "Security," he said calmly as the banging outside suddenly stopped. They heard a scuffle from the hallway. A man's startled yell cut short. A thud, then absolute silence. Kylo put the tablet down. He walked over to the kitchen sink and poured a glass of water, his hand perfectly steady. He brought it to her. "They will not bother you again," he said. His tone was not reassuring. It was a statement of fact, a promise. She took the glass, her fingers brushing against his. In that moment, she understood. The man she had married was not just wealthy, he was powerful, and he was dangerous. The night of the gala arrived like a verdict. The city's elite descended upon the grand ballroom of the Abeji Continental Hotel, a river of glittering diamonds and rustling silk. The Adeoye Global Conglomerate. 50th Anniversary Gala was a desperate display of power. Chief Adeoye stood at the entrance, a fixed smile carved onto his face. He shook hands, but his eyes darted constantly toward the door, searching for one face, the ghost investor K.O. "Any word?" he muttered to his assistant. His office confirmed he would be in attendance, Chief, but they gave no specific time. Beside him, Zola was in her element. She wore a blindingly bright fuchsia gown, a constellation of diamonds around her neck. Her phone was in her hand, as always, documenting her reign. Then Amara and Kalo arrived. They didn't make a grand entrance. They simply appeared at the edge of the crowd. She wore the simple dark blue silk dress, her only jewelry the pair of luminous pearl earrings. He was in a perfectly tailored dark suit, no tie. They were an island of understated elegance in an ocean of gaudy excess. Whispers followed them. "Is that Amara Adeoye? I thought she was married off to some nobody. Look at her dress. So plain. And who is that with her?" Zola saw them. Her eyes narrowed, a predator spotting its prey. A cruel, triumphant smile spread across her face. She began to move toward them, a shark circling. Amara felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. She instinctively traced an invisible pattern on the back of her hand. Kalo, walking beside her, seemed oblivious. His gaze was sweeping the room, analyzing the architecture. "The load on that central chandelier is improperly distributed," he murmured to her. "The mounting bracket is under significant torsional stress." His calm, technical observation was so out of place it gave her a strange, borrowed strength. The chief's daughter intercepted them near the champagne fountain. "Amara, I am so surprised you came." Zola's voice was high and loud, designed to draw a crowd. "And you brought your husband." She gave Kalo a dismissive head-to-toe glance. "Zola," Amara said, her voice even. "I have to say, marriage agrees with you," the younger woman continued, her words dripping with condescension. "It's given you a certain simplicity. It's very appropriate." Kalo remained silent, his expression placid. His stillness seemed to infuriate Zola more. She turned her full attention on him. "So you're the artisan. What is it you do exactly? Make little clay pots?" A small circle of onlookers had now formed. He did not answer, just watched her. His head tilted slightly as if she were a curious specimen. "Don't you have a tongue?" Zola pressed, her voice getting shriller. She reached out and touched Amara's arm, her fingers pinching slightly, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could still hear. "You see," she said to her audience, "this is what happens when you are not true blood. This is your future. Remember this." That was the line. The placid mask on Kalo's face did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. A light went out, replaced by something cold. He leaned forward slightly, invading Zola's space. Her triumphant smile wavered. He spoke, and his voice was not loud, but it cut through the surrounding chatter like a shard of glass. It was quiet, venomous, and for her ears only. "And what of value have you ever built, Zola?" The question was a stiletto, slid cleanly between her ribs. It exposed the entire hollow foundation of her existence. The color drained from her face. She recoiled as if he had physically struck her. At that exact moment, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. Chief Adeoye stood at the podium. "Friends, partners, welcome," he boomed. He launched into a passionate speech about legacy, innovation, and the future. Amara and Kalo stood at the back of the crowd. "It is time," he said softly. The man began to walk forward. He moved through the crowd with an irresistible momentum. He walked down the central aisle, his simple dark suit a stark contrast to the glittering sea of guests. The chief's voice faltered as he saw the lone figure approaching. The drumroll intensified. All eyes were now on Kalo. He reached the steps to the stage and began to climb. The chief stared, his mouth slightly agape. Yewande gripped his arm, her knuckles white. Zola's eyes widened in dawning, abject horror as she finally recognized the face of the man her father was about to introduce. The patriarch cleared his throat, his voice now trembling, as he finished his introduction with the name he had only ever seen on paper. "Please welcome Mr. Kaelo Onyeka Diallo." A deafening silence fell over the ballroom. The drum roll stopped. The music died. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning. Every single guest stood frozen, their champagne glasses halfway to their mouths. Kaelo Onyeka Diallo. The name echoed in the vast, silent space. A legend in financial circles, a ghost who moved billions from the shadows. And he was standing on the stage looking like the nobody they had all been whispering about. He walked to the podium. Chief Adeoye stood beside it, paralyzed, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief. His skin, moments before flush with performative confidence, was now the color of ash. He looked from his wife Yewande, whose hand was pressed over her mouth, to Zola. She was staring at Kalo, her jaw slack, her fuchsia dress suddenly looking cheap. The cruel queen of the Gala had vanished, replaced by a girl watching her world burn. Her husband reached the lectern. He did not look at the crowd. He adjusted the microphone, the small squeak of feedback sounding like a gunshot in the quiet. He turned his head and looked directly at the patriarch. "Thank you for the introduction," Kalo said, his voice calm and amplified. "And for the clarity." He paused. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable. Everyone in the room understood they were witnessing not an announcement, but an execution. Onyeka Capital has reviewed the proposal from Adeoye Global Conglomerate. He continued, his tone unchanging. "We have also conducted our own due diligence on the character of its leadership." His eyes flicked from the chief to his wife, and finally they rested on Zola. For a fraction of a second, his cold gaze held hers and she flinched. "Therefore, we will not be investing." A collective gasp went through the room, a sound like the sea pulling away from the shore before a tsunami. Chief Adeoye swayed on his feet, his hand gripping the podium to keep himself upright. This was a public death sentence. But the billionaire was not finished. "Furthermore," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "my firm has decided to extend a full line of credit to your chief competitor, effective immediately. We believe their leadership demonstrates a higher potential for growth." It was a kill shot. He hadn't just refused to save AGC, he announced he was financing its destruction. He looked out at the sea of faces, his gaze sweeping over them once before landing on Amara. He gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Then he set the microphone back in its stand and walked off the stage. The moment he stepped off, the room erupted. The silence shattered into 1,000 panicked conversations. Phones came out. Investors started heading for the exits. The party was over. The company was finished. Chief Adeoye remained on stage, a statue carved from ruin. Yewande was openly weeping. Zola just stood there, a hollowed-out doll. Kalo walked through the chaos, untouched by it. He reached Amara's side and simply looked at her, a silent question in his eyes. She gave a small nod. Together, they turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the smoldering wreckage behind them. The valet brought Kalo's car around. It was not a flashy sports car, but a sleek black unmarked sedan with tinted windows. He held the door for his wife, then got in the driver's side. The car was silent, gliding through the city streets. The weight of the evening settled between them. The victory was absolute. Amara looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. She felt not a surge of triumph, but a profound, bone-deep weariness. The fight was over. The cage was broken. After several minutes, her husband turned to her. The hard, icy edge was gone from his eyes, replaced by a quiet concern. He asked her a simple, human question. one that had nothing to do with billions or takeovers or revenge. "Are you hungry?" Amara turned from the window to look at him. She saw not the ghost, not the tycoon, not the predator, but the man who had noticed the bad ink in a pen, who had fixed a decorative banner, who had explained a broken faucet. A sound bubbled up inside her, something she hadn't felt in 15 years. It started as a small tremor and grew, and for the first time in a very, very long time, she laughed. It was not a polite laugh, not a performative sound. It was real, free, and completely unburdened. And in the quiet, anonymous car moving through the heart of the city, it was the only sound that mattered.